Ministry of Space, Ministarstvo prostora, is something that we thought is missing in the institutional framework of Serbia. You know, the institution that will actually deal with the fact that we have a lot of spaces, unused spaces and neglected spaces on one side, and then on the other, people who are really in need for like figuring out the housing solutions, or even kind of for just like recreation or culture or whatever. But it never happened even now, and we launched Ministry of Space as a collective 10 years ago. Even now, there is no system which is merging these two facts, these two needs. So in that sense, for us, it was kind of interesting to trigger that out. But also, it was when we decided to name ourselves like that, it was the moment of the national elections. And you know, in Serbia, with each elections, we are changing the number of ministers and the names of ministers. And in that particular point, we wanted to find out a number of property that is publicly owned, but is not registered. Basically, there is no kind of the register or catastrophe that is like bringing all this data together. So we basically tried to get those informations by introducing ourselves as the ministers from the Ministry of Space, which in Serbian sounds completely logical. And for a few months at the beginning, we were successful in that. And, you know, people were like, oh my God, there's a minister from Ministry of Space, you know, calling. So, but after like few months, like all these institutions figured out that that particular minister doesn't exist, you know, so they were kind of, they closed again for us. And it happened, the last time it happened was in 2018, when we had long conversations with different institutions on public-private partnerships, on how the public property is managed, you know, and we came, me and my colleague Senja came super prepared to that conversation. And at the end of it, when they didn't know how to, and they started to fight with us, like, you know, it's like we are attacking them personally. It was like really weird situation. And at the end of the conversation, okay, and you, this is like, they are faking it. This ministry doesn't exist. This is all like false interpretation. You know, we're like, yeah, of course we don't. I mean, you cannot even register like that. So it's not that we are like, we're lying or anything. It's just interesting to play with that name in that sense.
Because it looks like in Serbian society, we kind of have this real sense of authority of ministry. You know, I think it can be kind of funnily compared to his Dark Materials, this kind of fictional, very kind of Harry Potter, where there is this kind of ministry. I mean, even in Harry Potter, you get this kind of obscure ministry of you know, magic or something. So it's, I feel that in our society, there is a kind of real sense of authority of these ministries. Because I think, especially now, we do live in a pretty much a totalitarian regime. And so I'm just wondering, okay, on one side it was funny, but on the other side, in terms of your approach to what you do and how you act through it, how was it, well, similar or dissimilar to a structure of a, well, I don't want to say ministry, but of an established institution?
Well, in terms of on how the organization is established, it's very horizontal. So, and for us, that is like the most important way of decision making. So it has a structure, but it doesn't have hierarchy, which is also kind of, you know, breaking down this kind of power imbalance and this masculinity form of like decision making. So that was something that we believe, we preach in that, but not only in our organization, but in all the spaces or different kind of associations, assemblies, whatever collective processes we are taking part in. So in that sense, that's one side of it. On the other hand, we do our activities in different ways, depending on the situation. So we were squatting for years. So it's something that if we think that that's the tool that should be used, then it's squatting. if we think that any kind of policy proposal or kind of research has to be done in order to start to advocate for particular change, then we are all into it and like really dive into all the protocols, laws, institutions, and we really do a serious job. So the document, you know, I can stand behind it and say, okay, this is something that can be implemented. And this is really like a change maker. We also do a lot of research about different theoretical concepts. So we find ourselves in like the concepts, for example, the commons concept or the right to the city. So we are taking from the theory and then bringing back to it. So we're really mixing different approaches depending on the situation or the problem that we want to tackle. Sometimes it's also about criticizing the current status, but sometimes it's like, okay, how we can achieve the change. So we have to think about the vision, which for me is, how to say, and not only for me, but for the whole collective, more sexy, you know, more kind of challenging. For example, now we are creating a vision for Belgrade in 2041. So can we discuss our future and the future of this city in next 20? And that is, you know, challenging process, not only for ourselves, but also for the people that we invite to how we get there, what are the mechanisms, what has to be done, who are the actors that are involved. So in that sense, it's really kind of combination of different things, depending on what we want to do in that particular moment and where it's like and what is the long-term goal that we want to achieve. The criticism part of our work is very often a huge presence of humor in our actions and in our narrative, because we learned that it's something that mobilizes people, that brings people closer. When we wanted to address the particular problems in the city, and then when we were using the words like corruption, privatization, non-transparent businesses, you know, it's like these words are all over the place. So people cannot follow anymore. They are tired. They are fed up with all these terms. So you are losing their attention. And I mean, even for us, it's like tiring to be non-stop, like in that narrative. So we started, okay, let's try with humor, because joy, but also we are enjoying, healthy for us, you know, like it's kind of playful, you know, it's like you're making funny situations while dealing in important issues. And I will say that that's something that it's really kind of Ministry of Space style.
So what is the Ministry of Space? We've kind of understood where it comes from in terms of relationship to other institutions, but what is why is it necessary? Or what is missing in the institutional landscape that you're trying to achieve?
Yeah, well, I would say that the human scale, the human face of the institution is missing. That's definitely. Other thing that we found very important is to work with people and teach them and explain them in Serbia function. So you've been here, you know, the whole context. There is kind of a huge interest on different development projects which are kind of eating the green areas, the neighborhood around the city. People don't know how to protect. They don't understand the planning system. They don't understand the plan, the drawing. They don't know what can they do with the situation and how they can protect the environment. So what we do is basically the drawing, the plan. Then we for the different public inquiry through kind of action tools, and we had some success, but we usually work with the bigger groups in Belgrade. You know, when you have some kind of neighborhood that is connected, they have their own activities, they know each other, like residents who live there for a long period of time. And now in the recent year, it happens that people literally from the street come with their particular problem. Like there is an investor who is building next to their house and the house is tearing down, you know, and that's something that don't have tools to bring on the table to help. You can share your knowledge, but these are the specific things that are really on the institutional level. But by having all these stories literally on the daily basis, it's something that taught us that this kind of institution with the human scale who will translate system to people and kind of empower them and educate them to react and to participate is something that is a necessity. And what we learned, for example, with this vision for Belgrade in the next 20 years, is that these conversations were for me super interesting. You know, we were asking people, what do you want? How do you imagine Belgrade in 20 years? And they needed to start criticizing the current status, you know, like the everyday politics. And we're like, yeah, no, don't go there. So how do you imagine your life in 20 years? And it's kind of really difficult because nobody ever asked them, and they never posed that questions to themselves. But then when you start the conversation, you can hear really reasonable and great answers. But the thing is that no one ever asked them. And, you know, 20 years is not like 100 years. It's hopefully we will be alive. So, and it's still kind of a bit of a remote time period. So you can imagine something completely different from the current situation.
Why I think you're interesting as an individual is it's because you're both trying to influence the change in the system, so systemic change in terms of, you know, changes in laws or procedures, but then also on the other hand, you have a kind of activist side of your personality where you protest the kind of, you know, decisions and actions of developers or local authorities. So I'm just just in terms of how you position the kind of activist side in relationship to the constructive side in your personality, but also in kind of real terms.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I understand your question, and I was for a very long time in my life completely confused with that, because people were like explaining me, either you're activist, either you're researcher, because at the same time when I was squatting in Belgrade, I was finishing my PhD, and then everybody was telling me, you cannot do that. And I was like, I mean, first I thought, okay, I can't, but then I was like, why? I mean, I can do whatever I want, you know, it really depends on the approach. I started doing my PhD because I wanted to explain to myself, to understand better what is happening, you know, what are the relations, what the system is bugging. And also by having a PhD and advocating or like occupying spaces or like acting in the public space, I bring some kind of legitimacy to my work. I hate that, you know, but you have to do it, especially if you're a woman. You know, then you have to have, you know, like strong back and like strong titles around you in order for people to get you serious. And it really took many years of like explaining and playing and defending your approach and your thoughts and what you think are the values before people started taking you seriously. I mean, in Balkans, it's like for women, and especially if you're kind of unorthodox, it's really difficult. I mean, you have to use different mechanisms and yeah.
But,
I mean, I don't have a problem with like organizing a protest for 30,000 people and go and discuss with the city authority or state authority representative. You know, I mean, I can do both. It really depends on the situation. And when Belgrade Waterfront project was introduced in 2014 as a ticket out of crisis in Serbia, but basically it's a project that is, yeah, I don't know if that's a kind of gentrification by the book, but it's a privatization of 100 hectares of city center, turning the city center into luxurious ghetto, basically. We try to address the broader problems and issues that it will bring if it's going to be developed. And we did the contract that had like hundreds of pages in English, and we are not lawyers. We are mostly like urban planners, architects, or political scientists. So it really required involvement of like a lot of people that we knew back then. And through years, we learned that we get much more attention if we do this kind of protest or any kind of, let's say scandals, like bring a yellow hue in front of the parliament, or interrupt the session in the city hall with the beach equipment and start sing there and play, see what they will do to you, and these things were going through media. And what we were, as this contract says that we will own 30% of the whole area, and the deal on 70. That's a fucking scandal, but nobody is it's not interesting, it's boring, it's difficult to understand. So that was the reason why for us it was a combination of two things. And then on the election night in 2016, when the whole area was demolished by 30 people with balaclavas during the night, for others in Belgrade, for public, it was clear that there is something wrong with the project. And then the massive protest started, and we back then in 2016, we were a bigger group, bigger core group that was behind these protests. And in 2000, I think it was at the end of 2017, it was completely clear that then I stepped up on the movement, should become a political platform, a political whatever, and go for the elections on the city level. And the context in Europe was different in those particular years, because different movements and it started in Spain, from 15M movement, different smaller movements started to thinking about, okay, we need to enter the institutions, because that's where the change will happen. So the bottom up has to take over the institutions. And it was called municipalism, like the municipalist movement. This was spreading around Europe. So it started in Barcelona, and like the former squatter and the activist of La Paz, the movement against the mortgages, became a mayor of Barcelona. It happened in Madrid, it happened in La Coruña, in different cities, and then in Italy, and slowly spreading around. It was a huge conference, Fearless Cities, with 700 municipalities around the globe who had the same trajectory. And then it was also inspiring for us. Okay, let's take back the city. Unfortunately, due to the circumstances in Serbia, no resources, no enough capacities, media, no money involved, because it was really difficult to get any kind of sponsorship, and not only because nobody trusted you, but because if you are getting the money, then the government will attack you as a foreign funded, working against the interest, and how it's this narrative that exists in the 90s. So it's just really super challenging to organize all that thing. And at the end, it didn't pass the threshold of 5%, but it did gather around 40 or 50,000 votes, which was 3.5. And during the years, the platform grew, and now it's a serious political organization that is definitely going on 2022 on the city elections, and I guess vote on the national, that part I don't know. And for me, it's already something that we managed to create, even that kind of alternative in the political sense, as a political movement, political organization that I would happily support.
But where do you see the municipalism, or however you called it? Where do you see it today? Is that are you saying that basically we've missed the boat of the movement a few years ago, but the movement is still progressing in Belgrade and in Serbia?
Yeah, it's definitely progressing, and it's also spreading around smaller cities, towns around Serbia. What is also something that we all learned through years is that in order to achieve some kind of change, you have to scale it up. So it can be one direction is to bring that particular political platform on the national level. and start creating power and attention and support on the national level, or try to kind of create alliances and networks of different groups, and then as a you scale up to the national. So it really depends on the tactics or the strategy that those organizations are choosing. I mean, one of the inspiring examples is definitely Zagreb. So our friends from different movements, such as Right to the City or Green Action, or those who were fighting against different investors' urbanism in Zagreb. In one moment, they also decided that's the time to enter the institutions and to take back the city in that from that perspective. And they managed to get seats in the city hall. The platform Zagreb is ours did succeed, and they created later Možemo, which is kind of Yes We Can, or Podemos, also kind of inspired from the Spanish case, the national coalition. Also had a great success and was a third party in Croatia. So I mean, it can happen. It takes years and really kind of devotion, but it brings some change. And it's kind of a new green left coalition perspective that is really needed.
And there seems to be within that kind of political movement, there seems to be a real international kind of collaboration, or even within the countries, there seems to be a real emphasis on communication, collaboration.
It's super important. So for us, not only as a political movement, but for any kind of actions, it's really important to make this kind of peer-to-peer learning and exchanges. And also, it's not something that you can just copy-paste in your context. That will never. To learn and to adapt. Yes, of course, and it also depends on the contexts which are different. So I can learn from Germany or Netherlands or UK even, but it's not applicable in our context. So for me, it's more valuable if I speak with the Southern Europe or Eastern Europe, because it's something that is much more similar, and then these concepts can be adopted and then kind of implemented or tested in your own.
I think in some of the conversations with artists or curators, it's a different kind of conversation, but there is a lot of talk about unlearning, going backwards in a way, and challenging your preconceptions and challenging what you do and what you've been taught. So I'm just wondering whether there is also an element of that, of kind of really kind of systemic change that you're trying to kind of champion.
Well, yeah, and I would say that it's a process of collective learning. It's different from the traditional way of learning. In this sense, you are testing and trying over and over things that you never tried before. And there is no book that can teach you. There is no toolkit. You have to do it by yourself. You know, use the intuition. You feel some kind of intuitive. You have some kind of intuitive approach, but also in this kind of collective deliberation, you get to some point. And even if you didn't reach your goal, it doesn't matter. We collectively decide, and it's collective responsibility. So we try this, it didn't work. Let's try another approach. But we have to reflect on what was wrong in the previous approach. And that's the way of learning. For me, that's the most valuable thing.
And so if we just go to the kind of beginning of your practice as an activist, as I guess in some way a manager of an organization, you said you squatted a particular building. So how did that experience inform, or how did that experience set out your other actions, the actions that led you to be engaged on the level that you're engaged today?
Yeah, I would say that particular action completely changed my life, like completely upside down. Like something unbelievable. First of all, I never entered without permission anybody's property, you know. In that particular period, we received the wrong information that it's a public property and it was privately owned, which we learned a few months later. But we negotiated with the owner, and basically we had a verbal permission to stay there until he changed his mind, and we stayed there for 5 years. But the way how I understand the space, how I understand the collective processes, the collective decision making, the shared participation and shared ownership over resources was something that I learned there. I learned the importance of the social capital, of the social relations that we need to nurture and rely on, and also that people like to be engaged, but you never ask them. You don't expect that some passerby would be in like joining your activities as a participant, as somebody part of it, not as an audience. So we are all used to kind of when you have an idea to contact these usual suspects, the people who are always on the scene. But then it happened several times that I asked my electrician to take part in it, and he was super happy, and he really he was there, he was one of us, and for me that was moving, that changed my mind. So I can ask anybody to do whatever we need there or whatever we think should be done. Everyone who has specific skills or knowledge or just want to spend time with people and hang out, which is also fine, but that's how you build your group and your people, and that's the energy that brings the change. So that was something that I learned there. Before that, just like in that particular period, but by getting to know more Dobrica, Radomir, and Marko, and me, and even we were like 5 people who were who established the Ministry of Space. These 4 guys, they are from completely different backgrounds. 2 political scientists, 1 graphic designer, 1 civic engineer, and they also had the thoughts about the city, which I never thought that people outside my faculty have, because you are taught at that building that only you as an architect can play as a god and arrange the space according to what you think is the best. But no, every single person has their own wish, needs, experience, whatever. And by combining on that, you get a collage that is really kind of great. You get to play with it. You get to the great ideas which you by yourself cannot reach. It's impossible. And that was kind of the biggest learning. So that period of like 6 months to 1 year, that was what changed me, and it also influenced my PhD, my practice in total, the things that are interested for me as topics. Yeah.
Can you explain the building itself, and how did that process, the kind of physical engagement, translate into an activism that was related to it?
Yeah, so the building was the building had 1,500 square meters. And it was completely devastated and neglected. It belonged to the former Yugoslav company, like film production company, that was privatized in the way of privatization at the end of 90s and beginning of 2000s. And it didn't have electricity, water, windows, doors, nothing. This was just like a shell with unbelievable amount of trash inside. And we were like, why don't we start doing something here, And we invited around 60 people to come. The majority of those people were my colleagues, our colleagues, architects, who immediately started commenting like, no, we need 2 million euros to refurbish this building. I mean, I also have eyes. I also know that we need 2 million at least, but we don't have that money, So we can start by cleaning it ourselves, or we can just leave and cry because we did nothing, So what we agreed on was that we will meet next week and start cleaning the space, square meter by square meter, and see where it will go. And 5 of us came, so 55 people just like disappeared. And we were like, okay, I don't want this to kind of hurt me or like stop me in I didn't even know what will happen, but like in this experiment of how you can make a super small change. So we started this kind of cleaning sessions, cleaning weekends every 2 weeks. And then we thought maybe in between weekends, we can do some kind of events. You know, you clean the yard or you clean the big hall, then you can have an exhibition or a concert or even kind of a cooking in the courtyard. And that was a moment when people started to come to this kind of public events, you know, when it's kind of party mode. And in one point they just lost when is the cleaning and when is partying, and they started coming each weekend. So we had a critical mass that was important, you know, to be faster, but also to have a community that suddenly feels that space as it belongs to them, which is an unbelievable feeling. You know, it's kind of, you now have the ownership, not you as an individual, but you as a whole community. And when the winter came, I mean, it was the autumn, still September, but we knew, okay, winter will be here in 2 months and we will stay without this space because we don't have a heating, we don't have doors, we don't have wind. We then rely on our social capital and start thinking about the solutions. So it was step by step that we managed to close that building and to make the New Year's party, which brought thousands of people over there, and to create a space which at the end was a kind of social cultural center and the venue that was important for a majority of people in city of Belgrade. You know, it really kind of became an important point. It had 10 to 15 studios. It had a space to sleep, a kitchen, a gallery, a huge courtyard with their own kind of agricultural product. It had a school for the school that prepares kids for the faculty of art or the architectural faculty. It also had a kindergarten for the Roma kids in the neighborhood and the people who cannot afford or are not on the list for the regular kindergarten.
So you started to plug in even a kind of commercial elements into the...
Not commercial. Everything was non-profit. It was just the activities that were bringing different kind of people, but not only...
Okay, maybe not commercial, but like economic activity in some way or another, that you were kind of starting to plug in some kind of economic activity into it.
What do you mean by economic activity?
Well, I don't know. Somebody must have paid for the classes to get into this, you know, for these drawing
that's
classes.
What I'm explaining. No.
Right.
There were only donations. So you have a donation box and you put the money there.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it was important, and for us also in different spaces, not to commercialize the space, because it has to be available and open and like fair for as much people as possible. But also, if you bring money into the game, it can also create different power positions within the collective. So it's kind of, you have to be very sensitive and very careful about it. So for example, we have a bar during the party, but all the money goes into Inex film community. So then we make a list what we need to pay, the electrician, buy chairs and stuff, but nobody's earning money for themselves. So it's only for maintaining the building for these kind of costs. And it's super transparent. It needs to be super transparent. So on every meeting, you have to show the budget. You have to explain. I mean, now I'm explaining spaces that I'm also part of now. For example, magazine. So on monthly meeting, you have to show the budget. You have to show the cost. You have to show the revenues, whatever. And like we are all the same.
So you developed a model. So what was that space called? The first space, the big 1,000 square meters.
The first space was called Inex Film. And then the second one was the street gallery. It's an open space. It's a passage that we turned into a gallery. I mean, gallery is just a term. It's more like a social construct. Then it was Cinema Zvezda. Then it was...
Which also squatted.
Which we also squatted. And then Magazine. You've been in Magazine, but it's Magazine. In Magazine, we are part of the wider community of people who are illegally using it. And then it was, what was else? The military building. Oh, military building, but it was a fiasco. Army has a lot of property, you know, that is unused, and they're trying to sell it on the market prices, which is mission impossible, you know. So it's like it's empty, vacant for like decades, and we thought it's interesting to tackle this issue as well. You know, why you don't make some kind of reuse of these buildings, especially since they are occupying some of the really important parts of the city center or neighborhoods that are kind of super visible. It's not on the outskirts, so you don't notice them. And we were evicted after 24 hours. But they brought, the army with like full riot equipment to stand between the fence and the neglected building. It was like, like Monty Pythons that you're watching, like, come on, you just don't do that. This is like embarrassing,
Which building was that you tried to?
It was a building on Donji Dorčo. It had 16,000 square meters. It was really huge. But then like the most amazing situation happened. So my phone was ringing, and I answered the phone, and the guy on the other side said, "Hey, I'm like watching you on the television right now. Like, you guys, you're amazing. What you're doing, this is great. So I'm completely supporting you. And therefore, I would like to give you my boat." And I was like, but in this moment, your thoughts are not clear. So it was like, really, boat? Yeah, okay. Which boat is that? And then he said, the one that belonged to Tito. To Tito, the president of Yugoslavia. And it was like, seriously? Yeah. Before that, it belonged to King Alexander. And then who are you? I mean, these like two most important figures in our political and social life. And somehow he ended up owning it. So we went to
so he really owned the boat.
Yes, he really owned the boat, but he was also in the conflict with the city authorities. So they didn't let him move the boat where he wanted. There was some kind of pleasure he had, which I also think it's on the personal level, not only political. And he gave that boat for 2 years for the people who were taking part in this occupation of the military barrack, to use it for their different kind of social activities.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, that's completely unbelievable,
And so then you used it. So you didn't squat the boat because it was your boat. You could do whatever you wanted.
No, it was, actually, I was not involved in the boat itself. So I just connected people who were interested.
You just received the phone call.
Using the boat, and the owner who called me, and I was helping at the beginning with how it might work, what are the activities, how it can be organized, how you communicate that, what are the potential risks of having the private owner, how you communicate with him. So it's like super early period I was involved, and then I was just going there as a guest.
Okay, and so okay, great. So then there was both, and then in all those things that seem quite crazy in terms of just the kind of legal aspects of it. I mean, you must have become like a legal expert on occupying a building illegally.
Well, yeah, you become a legal expert in understanding that law does not allow any kind of activity which is not commercial. So public property management understands that the space can be used only for commercial activities, which is insane, So that's something that we really spend a lot of time in analyzing the legal framework on how the property can be managed. Then also what we worked on a lot was a proposal, what can be done. And I mean, we sent that proposal to different institutions, how they can manage their property better in order to give it on different kind of, to use different models of leasing.
So you're squatting their properties. Yeah, I just kind of want to pin this one down. You're squatting their properties, but yet you're trying to provide them with legal framework in which they would allow you to continue to do that, or allow other people to do the similar kind of thing.
Now, when you put it like that, it sounds ridiculous, but it actually makes sense, right?
It does make perfect sense.
Because you know why? Because if you just advocate with like showing papers what can be done, and just follow these steps, maybe it's not convincing. But if we are there and we bring additional value to the building itself, to the local neighborhood, local community, to the people who are using it, you know, to providing a program which is for free, like a cultural activities which are for free for a wider amount of people around Belgrade. That's something that then you can show as a portfolio. You know, this is how it works in practice. This is what you are stopping by being completely, you know, not open and distrusted to people. You know, that's the problem. And also, I mean, I have to just to be clear with this. If it's not legal, it doesn't mean that it's not legit. You know, the legal framework can be changed. You know, it was created by those in power when they wanted to achieve their own goals. But it doesn't mean that it works for all of us, and it works the status that we are all living. So in that sense, I mean, of course, some things should be illegal and defined by law as something that you shouldn't do. But this is, come on. You know, empty building and empty for decades, and you're paying for it. That has no sense.
But I think there is another thing that I hope you can acknowledge, and that is the kind of amazing cultural activity that you generate. The real kind of cultural life that you basically bring from nowhere. It's something that doesn't exist in that building that you occupy in the first place, and it's kind of incredible. And I'm just thinking, you know, whether you're able to assess that quality after you've done it.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure if I ever thought about it in that way, but it makes sense now when you mention. But you know, it's not us; it's the people who are part of all that thing. You know, everybody, everyone is there with reason, and everyone brings their own qualities and their own knowledge and own skills. You know, you're just supporting them. And I mean, I met amazing people over there with like amazing artists who can create things that are completely mind-blowing, but because they are not like established artists or well-connected or coming from academia, which is also sometimes the case, they don't get the space in the city. You know, you cannot exhibit in the Museum of Contemporary Art or any kind of established galleries. So these alternative spaces are the spaces that you can show your work. You know, the street gallery is the street that we created as a gallery space. And, you know, we heard that 35,000 people passed through that passage. You know, 35,000 people see your work. That's something that you cannot, even in the Museum of Contemporary Art, you cannot get.
That is so true. I mean, the reason why I'm mentioning this point about assessing or quantifying your success in regenerating a certain space is that I think it comes from just having observed London, where, you know, it can be quantified in very obvious financial terms. You know, artists go into Soho. Soho becomes the kind of incredible place full of life. The prices go up. The artists move out into the next area of London.
But it's not only that they have to move. People who live there, they have to move, and that's
that
a bigger
is also
problem.
true.
I mean, we, of course, we are completely aware of gentrification as a process. So you have to acknowledge it, and you have to understand how to avoid being a gentrificator or a space invader. So, for example, you know, I'm not into placemaking concepts and these kind of things. You know, it's like now you're emancipating a community. No, once you enter, you're part of the community, and you have to protect them, you know, as well. So it's not us versus them, or us who are now have a great minds and great thoughts, and we will now create the ambient that you really need because you didn't know how to, you know, nurture and form your space. No, you're now part of, so you have to protect it. You cannot
paint
allow
benches in red.
Exactly. So it's not only if I put myself in the role of artist. So of course I've benefit of being in the space which has a low rent, and when I get evicted, I caused the situation where all the people around me cannot live there anymore. So we have to work together, and we have to create alliances in order to stay there.
I really like your point about placemaking as a kind of, well, gentrification tool, but also a kind of very gimmicky tool that really does very little. In fact, it just turns places into a kind of, I don't know, just very strange places. But how do you avoid that? Is it a conscious thing? How do you avoid becoming a placemaker?
It's a conscious thing, definitely, but also it's a combination of both. You know, once I let's put it personally now. Once I come with the idea, what can be done with a specific space? It's not that I just go there, make what I think is the best, and then leave people dealing with it, thinking that now they will care. Why they would care about it? You know, that was just something that I thought it's the best. But I'm not. And then I can now return to the beginning of this conversation. You know, if you get people involved from the very beginning into the process, you are not important anymore. You're just somebody, as an architect, for example, or urban planner, who has specific skills on turning some space into a place or different thing. But they have to take part in it. They have to create a sense of belonging, and then they will protect it, and then they will use it, and they will more and more increase the value of that space. I mean, we also, what is very interesting, I mean, what people think that it's very unique about our approach is that we are not, we learn how to take part in the activity, how to create the space or create the entity, as now in Belgrade, different entities that we created. And then when we give the life to it and we are completely sure that it's in the good hands, we leave. We don't claim ownership over things. We never did. Sometimes it takes 3, 4, 5 years, sometimes it takes 10 years. It really depends on the particular situation. But once you are sure that that's it, now it's fine, now it can live its life, you leave it. And it's difficult to learn how, but you learn it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like an artist letting the artwork have its life.
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
But you're an architect. I mean, you were educated as an architect. So at what point were you kind of consciously letting go that education to do what you're doing?
I will. I cannot give you a very concrete answer because it's just not the thing that I should do on the call that is recorded. But let's put it this way. I was traumatized by the investor approach in development in Belgrade, and there was a particular situation when I saw that what people can do for profit, which nobody ever told me on the faculty that is happening in the real life. And after that particular situation, I decided, I quit, and I told myself, you will never do architectural design as it is now in your life again, and never for this kind of people. And I will use all my skills and knowledge to protect common people. And even if it's like on the micro nano level, I'm super happy and calm, and I can sleep well by doing it. I know that I'm doing a good thing. And that was a promise I made 12 years ago. And that's what I'm doing now.
Interesting. So there was a particular event. I mean, we don't need to go into it, but there was a particular kind of life-changing event. Wow. Yeah, because I think sometimes something traumatic has to happen for us to realize that the profession, well, doesn't behave in an ethical way. It really, I guess, a lot of times is a very slow process. It's like not obvious immediately, and it really takes years to digest. And
yeah, I mean, I also
just thinking back
in that period, just to mention this, which I also find it super progressive on the side of our friends from Croatia. They were translating back then in 2008 and 2009. They were translating a lot of work of Harvey and Lefebvre and you know, these kind of neo-Marxist scholars on the concept of right to the city and critique of everyday life and these things, and that was super inspiring for me. I didn't know back then where to put it. You know, it was kind of super broad and not completely understandable. But then through years, it was also something that I just like took as an inspiration when I decided to kind of change the way I will do architecture in my life, or planning, or whatever, like how I understand the city should be developed.
On this point that you just mentioned, I'm wondering whether there was something with that kind of socialist heritage in Yugoslavia, or a kind of rediscovering it after years of failed democracies and capitalism in Yugoslavia, with all these failed privatizations, which really led to both a kind of destruction of cities with these buildings that you've, in an interesting way, had to kind of reoccupy. But yeah, so I'm just wondering whether there was a kind of new understanding of socialism, and whether it ever kind of connected to the country that we used to live in, or I never used to live in, but I don't know, maybe you lived in for a few years.
Yeah, well, I would say that the nationalist government that we had in the 90s and later on really tried to kind of bury the concept of the political conception of workers' socialist management, right? That we had, which was the unique political concept in the world that we had in Yugoslavia, and this decision making on the lowest level of the society, and the power that is also on the lowest level of the decision making, and like to have people highly politicized and involved in different decisions. So that's the value of the system that we had, but was, as I said, buried for decades in order to create new identity that is completely detached from what we had. And I'm not glorifying the period of Yugoslavia. I would say, I mean, for me, that's you probably know that the political concepts that and the arrangement that I'm like leaning towards, but we never discussed as a society about the good things and the bad things that we can learn, like to reflect on it, you know, to see what are the concepts that we can bring back and what are the things that didn't work, you know, and there are many. And what is now emerging, it's this concept of commons, which came from the West again as a new discourse that can be understood as a third approach, you know, between this dichotomy of state and market and neoliberal capitalism and authoritarian regimes. And, you know, in some kind of framework, we already had it. You know, we had it, but we didn't manage to learn from it. You know, like to have the whole philosophy behind the commons is basically the idea of having the community governing the resources that belongs to that community, which completely makes sense, you know. And if we are all, as I said several times, if we are all involved, educated, and politicized on that level, you know, we will do that for our own best, you know, based on our own shared interests. So in that sense, that's something that I'm really leaning towards as a political concept, as some kind of democratic socialism. I would say this is like the closer thing that that I see as some kind of systemic change. I'm not sure if we will ever be able to reach it, and what are the steps, I mean, or at least during my life, but I would like to see that kind of change.
And then is there something in the legacy of, well, the socialist,
you know, for example, what is the one of the milestones of the political system that we had was the right to house, you know, the right to housing. And probably Dubravka Sekulić spoke about that. She wrote about it in her book. we were the only country who acknowledged the right to have a house, to have a roof above the head in 1953. You know, back then we knew what are the primal human rights, and now we completely forgot it. You know, like Serbia is the second country for already few years in Europe where its citizens cannot afford housing anymore. So it's like people are under housing stress, which means that they are paying more than 30% on different housing burdens, let's put it like that. So people cannot afford it, and we completely lost that we had that as our right, which was fulfilled. I mean, the way it was fulfilled was problematic. You know, you had those lists, and then who has a priority. So as an idea, as a concept, through decades, it was good, but then it broke in several places. So let's see what went wrong and how we can fix it. Now, I mean, the market will not provide housing. It's not affordable. We cannot afford we cannot have our basic needs fulfilled, because there is nobody, you know, the state withdraw, left to the market to come up with a solution. And now you have a situation where square meter in Belgrade costs between 3,500 euros and 9,000 euros, where citizen has an average salary income of 400 euros. You see the discrepancy? So what will happen? How the city will look like? So it is announcing the huge spatial and social segregation that is about to come. So we took part in creating, for example, 2 or 3 years now. 2020 doesn't exist in my head, so that's why I'm not sure whether it was 2 or 3 years ago. We were taking part in creating an alternative affordable model of housing as an affordable solution that was later even adopted in the housing strategy of Belgrade, which is a document that probably nobody will ever read. But, you know, we did that additional effort to say, okay, we know how this can be managed, you know, and it's not only us, there are different groups, you know, the STELT who builds a city, they're all creating some kind of models of affordability of housing. And, you know, you are just like not open for any kind of proposal or discussion. So I'm again, like away from your question, but yeah, for example, that's something that is, you know, the housing, the basic needs that are covered by these kind of the associations of what was the organization of, was it Association of Basic Labor? How was the name? BALS, which was kind of, you know, the workers unit that thinks about what, yeah, exactly. What are the facilities needed? What are the needs that needs to be covered? How we do that as a society? How much from your salary, and which was like 0.000 amount of your monthly income that you basically invest or give to support our future, you know, our better living conditions. So in that sense, it was really kind of turned towards society rather than towards individual and profit.
It looks like the Serbian political environment is a kind of really strange example of sustained, you know, power. Could you reflect on that context? I mean,
yeah,
is it just an extension of 1990s, or?
Definitely. I mean, I can maybe like to illustrate that. I feel like, you know, like being in a Mad Max movie when you're trapped by these lunatics, you know, and, you know, like in any other horror movie where like the group of complete lunatics are controlling and like hostaging a huge amount of people who don't know what to do to like liberate themselves, and then and then there is a small group of people who start to think about the solutions. So that's kind of the situation. I mean, it also brings different kind of emotions. Sometimes you feel like, okay, there is nothing to be done, let's leave, and just like turn off the light. And sometimes you get inspired, or you get, and it's usually when I get inspired or when I get energized is by working with people, you know, and then it kind of makes sense to stay. You know, it makes sense because I don't want to leave. I would like to change this and to make a better conditions for everyone. I mean, I know it sounds like utopia, but I'm also over optimistic, and people know that. So yeah, nobody complains about these kind of thoughts that I share often. I mean, the political landscape currently is pretty terrifying, since, as you said, we don't have any opposition, so we only have government. The elections that are coming in a year might bring the change, but also this year as an electional year will be very difficult for a lot of people. I mean, the narratives that will be used by the government and different tools and the way how they fight with people who don't think the same way are really terrifying. I mean, we need to think. I started to think. I sued I filed the lawsuit against the deputy mayor of Belgrade. So, I have to think about, so I often now measure like what are the risks, what are the impacts, what would be the tactics, when and what you speak and why, so these kind of things, we are in that particular moment right now. I mean, I sound confusing because I'm confused, and I'm kind of thinking what can be done.
Yeah, and you're in it. I guess sometimes it's easier to see it from outside with a kind of filter, but because you are within it, you're literally in the political arena with these kind of nasty people. You're filing lawsuits against them, and
yeah, but that's just to explain and to illustrate the level of insanity. I'm not trying to be involved in the political movement and in the politics, in everyday politics as such. That is not something that just like is my cup of tea. I'm not interested in that. Not because that's the way how politics is done in Serbia. It's like toxic, it's like a cancer. It eats you. You cannot think and speak about the politics. You can speak only about the dirty laundry of the individuals that are on the political scene. And that's the problem, my mindset doesn't work like that. And that's the reason why I'm not getting involved into politics. Other thing, what's the particular situation? We had a plan on new development project in Košutnjak, which is a city forest, one of the most lungs of Belgrade, and Belgrade is for already 2 years the most polluted city in the world, like before Beijing, like the most polluted. Every single day you can see the air. And in those conditions, in the state where the city is, they decided to cut 300 acres of the city forest. So, I mean, like the sense is saying you don't do these kind of things. What is your argumentation? Why are you doing that? You also need to breathe. You need oxygen as well. It's not about profit anymore. It's like the basic elemental needs for people to survive. And we were involved in this kind of bureaucratic procedure of like sending objections, being involved in the inquiries and stuff like that. And instead of answering these concrete questions, what are the reasons behind, what are the benefits, what are the risks, what change it will bring, I was personally attacked of earning millions of dollars, which I then, with which I do money laundry and provide like illegal drugs to the political movement, and above all of that, I'm not paying taxes. Seriously. That's the way how we communicate. And of course, I filed the lawsuit. I mean, I would never do that. I would be happy if I didn't do that. But, I mean, it's over your head. It's like you won't talk with me like that. It is not an option anymore.
Again, we've now understood their mechanisms in terms of how they communicate to any form of opposition, even though we don't have an official opposition. I think it might be interesting to think about how this politics and this kind of rhetoric translates onto a built environment, onto a city as a physical manifestation of the regime, whether they're kind of neo-nationalists, they're bringing in these kind of Dubai-like developments, but then at the same time they're kind of also have a little bit of a Skopje 2014 approach, which is rebuilding the kind of medieval country, which is just insane. So yeah, can you describe Belgrade today as a kind of physical place?
Yeah, as a physical, well, it's kind of the imprint of the interests of government and of showing power on every single corner, you know, by building this Dubai style district. Basically, it's really a huge huge surface that is covered by these buildings. But also by creating new kind of historical and cultural identity, I would say, you know, like rebuilding, rethinking, retalking the narratives of the mid-century, and now imposing them as something that is like the collective identity, collective memory, our, you know, our only identity. And our greatest value is the mix of different identities. You know, we were under Ottoman Empire for 500 years. We were a communist country. We were a socialist party. We were a medieval empire. We had all these things, you know, and this kind of collage of different identities and different architectural styles and different monuments is the uniqueness that you can also bring. And also, I mean, by opening that kind of discussion, it's also super emancipatory. You know, it's very valuable. It's very open. It's very kind of, how do I say that? Yeah,
inclusive.
Inclusive, exactly. Thank you. Which they are trying to erase. You know, I mean, if you have a capital that still has the names of the streets named by the cities of the country that we were in war, that speaks about your inclusivity and openness. It doesn't speak that you lose the power over there. It doesn't. It's not a revenge. It's cheap move of someone who doesn't have anything else to bring on the table. And that's the saddest thing, you know.
So what are they trying to achieve by turning Belgrade into this a kind of, you know, fountain and medieval monument built you know, 2 weeks ago?
To be honest, I don't think that they have some kind of long-term strategy. No, it's not like, oh, let's think.
Let's not give them too much credit.
Yeah, exactly. You know, those are like the cheap points that you need. I mean, you know that we have elections every 2 years. So you need to fulfill this period between the elections. But like, you know, with these cosmetic changes, you know, fountains, monuments, huge buildings around where nobody lives, you know, it's like this whole area is in dark non-stop, you know, why, for whom is that, you know? I mean, it doesn't make any sense, but you're kind of trying to impress people to get them to vote for you or what. And, you know, like the imprints that you live in the urban space, you cannot change them. Once they're there, that's it. You know, it's not like the mandate thing that you have, for example, for 2 or 4 years. You cannot plan the city in that way. Everything you do will have consequences, long-term consequences, and we need to think about that. You know, you have to think like in Switzerland, you know, they think in the next 100 years, completely aware that all those people who are thinking about the next 100 years will not be live in that moment, would not be alive. So that's the approach. That's what you do when you love the space you live, when you love your people, and when you think about the future generations. The world don't stop with you, you know, it has to.
Interestingly, that seems to be a kind of reoccurring issue with our political establishment. It looks like there is no really a culture that acknowledges time, beyond you being in power.
Yeah, exactly. And there is also to add one more element, this kind of masculine patriarchal perspective in building the city. Each man that was on some high position had an ambition to build something that is super, super tall, the highest building, the highest bridge, the whatever is highest. And then the next one is like, I can build something that is higher than your highest point, So now you have we're all getting crazy, but that's how you're proving your power, I guess. And it's totally masculine thing.
Yeah, it's totally Freudian psychoanalysis. That is the environment. We've kind of understood the kind of political and physical environment. And maybe it's now the time to understand the space that you currently occupy. We've spoken about Ministry of Space, but maybe we should talk about magazine and the kind of physical space. I was really inspired by the fact that you were still able, in this total insanity, being surrounded with hyenas that will literally eat you, you're still able to exist. So what structure have you constructed to allow you to operate?
Well, I think I created a bubble or an environment where I feel safe. That's the first thing and the most important thing. And also where I feel inspired and where things are kind of happening through different collective processes. When me or somebody else has an idea and we are trying, it's a new thing, and then we are trying to come to solution. And it's also, I think that is a thing that is really super connected with my formal education of being an architect, trying to achieve the solution. This is like the engineer way of thinking. Exactly. So, for me, it's not enough just to name the problem or to map the problem, but to see how it can be solved and what are the benefits, who benefits from it, what are the value that it brings, all these kind of metrics coming together. Magazine that you mentioned is a particular space, a very unique space in Belgrade. And we are part of it as 80 other organizations and individuals. And we all together are using that spatial resource as a commons. We are the community that is governing the space. We set our rules, we set our values, our principles, programs, and the way how decisions are made. And it's very horizontal. It works. I was very surprised. I was involved from the very beginning, from 2014, when the new model was tested, and the new model was the model of open calendar, with the idea behind let's open it in order to protect it because we were illegally there. So the online tool, the calendar, is a tool where you just add the slots and organize your program over there. And magazine has 0 employees, so there is no one who, there is no curatorial concept or some kind of steering committee or a board who will decide on what is allowed and what is not allowed. But we as a community, we have monthly assemblies, and the people who are on the monthly assemblies, they are kind of discussing and deciding, but still not entering this curatorial or programmatic kind of limits of the
discussion. Yeah.
And it's non-profit. It cannot be commercialized. You also, even if you're kind of a newcomer and you don't want to be involved in the decision-making process, you can still use the space. So it's completely open for everyone. And me as a regular, because we have these kind of 2 users, the newcomers, the new users, the occasional users, and the regular users. So me as a regular user, I don't have a privilege or priority over the space. We are completely equal. The priority is decided by the openness of the program. So if it's a public program, then it has a priority. rather than just a meeting or some kind of closed discussion. And the reason for it is because then you bring people get to know about the space, are getting used to it, they're taking part in it. And then every time there is a threat to be evicted from the space, you have your critical mass around you, which happened several times. So there were people who protect magazine. And now we are in very specific moments. I'm again in the working group on redesigning the model of how decisions are made, how the space is used. So we're a working group of 7 women, I think 7 or 8. And then there is a working group who is negotiating the legal status of magazines. So for the first time, there is kind of a tendency coming from different institutions that it might, the problem might be solved. So what we are proposing is probably some hybrid model. We will see now. We are currently in drafting the proposal of civil-public partnerships or some kind of cooperative. That's something that we are now deciding what will be the best solution for us. But at the beginning of setting the idea of having the open calendar and everybody deciding and so many people involved, it really sounded like utopia.
Can you just explain what the open calendar means?
It's an online tool. When you have, like, on one side, you have the rooms, all the spaces that are available, and then here the dates, and you just add the slots. And usually you put some kind of small description, what is there, or you also add if you have some additional needs like technical equipment, or you would like somebody from the photo team to cover the event because you need some kind of professional photos, this kind of, and the phone number. And we try not to avoid overlapping of the programs, of course, and to kind of, this calendar, it has like hundreds of events per month. So I think in total per year, it's more than 4,500 events that are for free.
It's basically open to artists. It's open to literally anyone who wants to use the space.
Exactly. I think it's really worth to mention that it started in 2007 as an initiative of the independent cultural scene, and back then the mayor of Belgrade, who was kind of open to the idea of creating an alternative cultural center, let's put it like that. But the idea never came into realization. So the people who were back then, it was 6 organizations from the independent cultural scene. They got the keys, they entered there, but their status was never legalized. So in 2014, there was a first threat that the space will be evicted. And then that was a moment when these organizations invited the association, Independent Cultural Scene of Serbia, which is a huge association that gathered all of different actors, including us back then, to kind of help and support. And in the beginning, it was really kind of artistic cultural space venue. But then the open calendar brought people from all kind of backgrounds and field of interest, which before that never, or not in that amount, worked together, didn't collaborate, So like the cyclist movement came, anti-eviction movement, the student protest, different political actors. So now they're all in the space, and that creates kind of additional value, and also it increases the level of struggle and the struggles and the problems and solutions that are being addressed. Now you have like artists working with the anti-eviction movement, cyclists working with the environmental movement, and then also artists creating additional things. So there is like a mix of different things. And I think that people also understood that by doing some things by ourselves alone, we won't achieve much. But if we come together, then the change is much closer. You like put all our strengths and efforts into that, and understand that the fight for affordable housing is the same as a fight for affordable space for production. Those are all the same things.
I'm thinking you have learned, like it was a process, right? So one question that I kind of wanted to ask is how the first big squatting ended, and whether, what happens when it ends? you know.
Oh yeah. Well.
And then I think that can lead us to the next question as to what is the kind of full cycle of life of these kind of movements.
Well, I will immediately answer your second question. So I think that we are still at the beginning. So we'll see how the cycle will be closed. For sure, what is the next plan of the Ministry of Space is to have our own house and our own space that will bring all these communities, formal, informal, grassroots, that are somehow involved into city development issues that we worked with already for many years, and now we want to have them all in the same space to work together. So we are now searching for a house, and that's really kind of disturbing thing to do in Belgrade, because there are unsolved ownership statuses of the plots or houses, or the developers that already bought everything. So we're like really now struggling with that. And to answer your first question, how it ended. So the whole process with INEX was super challenging thing, because that was one of the the first squad. There was like few anarcho spaces in Belgrade, but on a smaller scale and with like already defined groups. And this was like everybody come space. So it was kind of at the beginning very difficult to facilitate all these interests, all these backgrounds, all these wishes. It was, in that sense, it was like super challenging. Also, the building itself was huge. You have to figure out how to occupy specific spaces, what is open for everyone, what is closed, what is for like only the community who is using it. So that was another challenge. And the governance model, how we are governing this space. And we came with the idea that it should be horizontal, that the users of the building are the meeting is the boss of the building. And for majority of people back then, it was rocket science. Yeah, I don't get this. So I don't want to go to the meeting. Who is the boss of this building? I only speak with, like the leaders. And, and then you're like still addressing them like to a meeting on Saturday at 5. And that's the only space where you can like share what you want, if it's like the programmatic thing, or, hey, you have some concerns or suggestions. And it was really like to train that, to exercise this kind of thing, that was super difficult. And it had ups and downs until the point where we had different groups, like the punk group, anarcho-punk group, and then the artists who were not able to communicate among themselves. It was like two worlds, completely two worlds. And it brought additional problems and kind of a bit of unwelcoming environment for majority of people. I had like nervous breakdowns several times, so I was like leaving and then coming back and then leaving again, and stuff like that. And at the end, the owner also it was a kind of a breaking point for him as well, because he was in the moment when he was negotiating for a specific plan on that area for his building as well. So he wanted the building to be empty. But already these guys were in such a fight that it was, natural to leave the space and kind of just like leave that toxic environment. So out of Phoenix, 3 spaces were created. So one is Sketch 22, Coaca 22, which was occupied by the artists, by the first floor. And then the ground floor group, they occupied Okretnica, very close to Pančevo Bridge. And then we started this Zvezda thing. So that's, for me, that is kind of, if I should say what is the biggest value of Phoenix, I would say